right. Well, welcome everybody. I'm Meg. I'll be your host today from the Edmonton Public Library, but I won't be in the screen much because I'm not our guest expert, but I'll be manning the Zoom chat. So if you do have any questions, you can put them in there and I can read them out loud, or you can unmute yourself to ask if that's easier for you. And I think we're ready to go. So I'm going to welcome Judi, who's going to be taking us through the baking tonight. And hopefully we all have a really good time. So thanks, Judi, if you want to take it away.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to my home. So I'm Judi from Loaf Me, and tonight we're going to make a spectacular artisan bread. So does everyone understand what artisan bread? Maybe I'll just walk through it. This is going to be a white bread, but a lot of people think I've made a sourdough just because of the shape of it, which makes it an artisan bread. So I'm going to show you, this is a no knead, very simple, but you'll impress your family and friends with this, okay? So first, I'm just going to get some, so maybe I'll just walk through the ingredients first. In the event that you want to follow along, and I think, Meg, you're going to give everyone the recipe after the fact if that's what they would like. Is that true?
Yes, for sure. Yes.
Okay. Excellent. So I'm just going to get some hot water. So a cup, oh, sorry, I was going to go through the ingredients. Sorry about that. So I have 1 cup of bread flour and 2 cups of all-purpose flour. I have a teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of sugar, fresh rosemary, and roasted garlic. I roast it in olive oil and then I puree it.
I did have somebody asking if they can use whole wheat flour instead.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So just substitute the all-purpose flour with whole wheat for sure. And then, of course, I have our yeast that we need to use to get the bread to rise. So just give me a moment. I'll just get my hot water, okay? Sorry about that. So the hot water is between 110 and 120 degrees if you want to check the temperature. All I do is I run the hottest water in my tap, and that is usually between the 110 120. So I don't actually check it. But so you're welcome to do that when you're first starting out, just to make sure that you have everything right. So then I'm just going to add the hot water to the bowl, and I keep my yeast because I use quite a bit of it and I want to keep it as fresh as possible. I keep it in a canning jar. A lot of people use the little packets, so that wouldn't be necessary. And I'm using a ½ teaspoon of yeast. So I'm just sprinkling it over the top. Try not to just dump it all in. You want to sort of make sure that it's spread across the water.
And how much water was that? I did have somebody confirm.
It's a cup and a half of hot water.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. So you put in your yeast, and then you can immediately add your teaspoon of salt, which I also like to sprinkle across, and your teaspoon of sugar. The sugar, it's not adding any sugar to the actual recipe. It's just activating the yeast. So you want to make sure that you use that all the time, and the salt helps the whole chemistry of the yeast to activate and foam up. So after about 5 minutes, there should be a nice cap of foam on top. So just in the interest of time, I won't be able to show you what it looks like, but you want a good inch of foam on the top, so it just will cover the whole top of the water. If it does not foam, that means that your yeast is bad, okay? But typically, if you're just buying, like I said, those little Fleischmann packages, it's fresh and you shouldn't have any problem. Okay, so if everyone's comfortable, I'll just carry on without
A question. You said 1/2 teaspoon of yeast?
That's right, a half a teaspoon, exactly.
How long will it take to foam?
5 minutes.
So usually it's about 5 minutes
Okay.
that you'll get your good foam on top. I mean, even if you have just a small layer of foam, it's still going to work. But I just like to, I like my bread nice and puffy, so I make sure that I leave it for 5 minutes and get it nice and foamy. But you don't need to go more than 5 minutes. Okay, so I always
Cup and a half.
start with the bread flour and add it in together. Okay, so just add in the bread flour and the whole wheat flour, or rather the all-purpose flour. And now when it comes to the rosemary and the garlic, this can be personal choice, okay? So I like a lot of rosemary and I like a lot of garlic. So I like big flavor. But if you're measuring it out, what I would suggest is to start with 1 teaspoon of the fresh rosemary. Now, I always recommend using fresh rosemary. You just buy the fresh rosemary in the produce department, strip it off its stem, and then I cut it up, coarsely chopped. It doesn't need to be finely chopped. Again, that's personal preference, but I just do a coarsely chopped because you'll be there for days if you're trying to get it finely chopped. So I just do coarsely chopped. And then we're just going to add the rosemary in. So again, after you do this a few times, you'll get an eye for how much you like. And then if you, so again, what I do with the garlic is I buy the garlic bulbs and I keep them whole, just cut off the top of the, just enough so that the olive oil can get inside. So it doesn't have to be all of them chopped because then it may just fall, the bulb may fall apart. So just chop off the top, and you want to do this beforehand. Chop off the top and just drizzle olive oil over top. Now that's my preference, is olive oil. I recommend that you don't have to do flavored or anything like that, just plain olive oil. And if you want extra virgin, that's your choice. Drizzle it over the top, put it in a tin foil, sealed, and then just put it on a baking pan. I bake it at 400 degrees for 20 to 25 minutes. So depending on how hot your oven is, right? So just bake it like that. I would do that if you're making it overnight, then I would do that in the morning. And then, so it gives them a chance to cool, because you need to be able to handle the bulbs. And I've had the experience of having the bulbs just be so hot that I'm not happy. So make sure that you let it cool down. And I just use a little food processor, and I just simply puree it right up. So that's what it looks like after. And I use one and a half usually tablespoons of garlic. I would start with 1 tablespoon just to make sure that you have the right amount of garlic. Some people like a lot of garlic, but for selling to the general public, I use a tablespoon and a half for them, just because that seems to be the middle of the road, and then people can adjust it as you know, if they want more garlic, they can put garlic salt on it or whatever they want. Okay. So I'm just going to add in the garlic. And if at any time I'm going too fast, please let me know. So now here's your choice, okay? So I'm going to hand mix it, which it helps to get a good distribution. So if you're only making 1 loaf, I would recommend just hand mixing it. You can use a spatula or a wooden spoon, whichever it is, but you want something that can really mix things up because it's going to get quite solid. So some people will use a hand mixer, which is what I use to make the volume that I'm making, because typically I'll be making 18 to 25 every day. So because of that, my arm would be broken if I if I had to hand mix it all, as you can well imagine. So all I'm going to do now is just take all these things and I'm going to mix them together. And you want to just keep scraping the sides, making sure you're getting all that flour and rosemary and garlic all mixed in there. So you just, I don't know if you can see maybe that it's starting to form into a bit of a ball. And this is my personal preference. I like to have it in the ball just because when it's doing its rise, then it's all one solid ball. Then I don't have to be fussing with, you know, getting stuff off the sides and, you know, trying to get it into a good shape. So I just do it right from the get-go, and it usually works out pretty darn good. So you just want to keep mixing, and really the rosemary, the garlic, it just takes care of itself. It does mix in as long as you do a nice puree on your garlic, okay? So essentially this is done. That's how quick it is when you're just doing one loaf. All right, so you just get it good mixed. Now I'll just show you what it looks like. So you want it to have, I don't know how well you can see it, but you want it to have a solid consistency like this. Now, sometimes it, for whatever reason, maybe you put in a spot too much water, or the flour was just a little bit off. What I do highly recommend is anytime when you're measuring your flour, make sure that you scoop and then you make it level. The best way, that's the best way to do it, because then your flour's breathing before it goes in. Because if you just, you know, pack it in right out of the bag or whatever container you keep it in, it won't have a chance to breathe. So you want to do that nice scoop so it's nice and loose, and then just level off the top of the measuring cup. So again, that's what it looks like. It's like, as you can see, it's not really moving all that much. So that's the consistency you want to get. And I wish we had smell-o-vision because it's pretty darn good right now. So
Let me ask, what does artisan bread versus other kinds of bread? Like, what makes something an artisan bread?
it's just, so what it means is it's just going to be a round bread at the end. So artisan means that it's just that the shape of the bread. So it's kind of a bit more rustic rather than like an actual loaf of bread. So it's round.
That's a good answer.
Thanks. So now that you have this together, what you want to do, now this is again a personal preference, and I know I'm saying it far too often, but it really is. I personally love to cover it with saran wrap opposed to a towel. Now, this is probably not a popular answer, but the main reason is I don't want any kind of debris on the towel. So even if it's a clean towel, sometimes there might be a little bit of hair or something like that. So I love to cover it with saran wrap. You can do saran wrap and a towel, or if you just want to go wild, go for the towel, okay? So that is essentially what you're going to do. Now, after this is done, because we're not kneading it, we need to make sure that it rests for at least 8 hours. It can be up to 24 and it's still golden. So you have a window of 8 to 24 hours that you can leave it. So I'm not sure if I said active yeast that I wanted to use. Do not use instant yeast. You want it to be active, and that's a slow rising yeast, so that's important. So 8 hours, so I usually do it in the evening, so that in the morning when I get up, that's usually 3 o'clock in the morning. So, so for you, I mean, I would say, you know what, even if you did it like 9 o'clock at night, by the time you're up in the morning, you're still in that 8 to 24 hour window. And even if you want to do it for dinner and just start an hour before dinner, then you're good to go too. So you leave it. You want it to be in a warm place, not a hot place. It doesn't need to be in a hot place, but just, you know, your home, as long as you're leaving it around 71 degrees or whatever, then it's good. I run my AC, so my house is a bit cooler, but it still rises really nice and it works out well. So you're going to see, like if you have the saran wrap, it starts steaming up right away, and that means it's sealed, because that's really important. I just find that you get such a beautiful rise and those nice big holes in the bread if you have it nice and sealed. So my recommendation is use saran wrap, but please know you don't have to use saran wrap. Okay? So basically, after 8 hours, let me just, it's the magic of video, I have one that's already done. So this is what it looks like after 8 hours, or between 8 and 24 hours. So you can see the nice flecks of the rosemary, and you can smell the garlic. I'll show it, you'll see it a bit better in a second here. I'll show you what it looks like. So you want a piece of parchment paper, because that's what we're going to put it in when we put it in the Dutch oven. So I have my parchment paper here, and I'm just going to take my saran wrap off. Now I'm going to wear a glove. Because you're making it for your friends and family, I mean, this is a personal choice. I just don't really want to have, I always use gloves. And of course I wear a mask when I'm making it. But I just don't want to get my hand dirty tonight, so that you have to look at me with my dough covered hand. So I just take the bowl. This is my, and I just scrape along the side, because all you want to do is just get all that loveliness out of the bowl. So I just keep scraping, and then I just take it and put it right in the middle of the parchment paper. And you just want the parchment paper big enough that it's going to fit your dough, and fit into whatever size Dutch oven you use. I find that 3 to 4 quart cast iron Dutch ovens do the best result. I'm not saying that you have to use cast iron, because I can tell you I've used other. So I just use even cheap, like metal with the copper bottom. I've just used whatever you have. I've used ceramic, like it really, they all do the same. Okay, but I have the preference of the cast iron, so that's what I use. I just find it does the nicer job for me. So that's what I
have a question, if you don't mind. Is it okay just to use a cookie sheet?
Absolutely. So what I would say is, it's not the cookie sheet, because it won't get hot enough, and that's what you need it to be hot. You can use you know, the pizza stones, the terracotta pizza stones, or those baking stones.
Mm-hmm.
You can use that, but I don't recommend that using a baking sheet unless you have a really commercial grade baking sheet, because you won't get that distribution of heat that you need.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so now we have, I don't know that you're going to see what I'm doing. So, so we have the dough all on the parchment paper in the middle. So now what I'm going to do, and I don't know how I'll try and explain it as I do it. So all I'm doing is I hold the parchment with my one hand, and I'm just taking and I'm folding all the sides over. So you just keep going around and folding it up. And you want it to be in this, like a disc, okay? So you'll just keep folding, and I'm kind of a little OCD, so I like mine to be super round and what's the word? Uniform. So I just keep pulling it over, and especially if it's a little wet, you want to do it a number of times, okay? And I like to go at the top and do little peaks at the top, okay? So I just keep going until I feel that it's solid enough and is a nice shape. And you can do it any shape you want, but of course we're using a round Dutch oven, and you want it to be an artisan bread, so it does look lovely when we're done, and I will show you that, of course. So I'm just keep doing it until I feel satisfied. So and you can sort of see the height of it, but that's what I've done. So I just put it was out flatter, and I just keep pulling it over and folding it on top. Does everyone feel comfortable with that?
I don't see any questions, so hopefully that made sense to people.
Okay, excellent. So once you have this lovely ball, in the meantime, what you want to have happening before you're even doing this is you want to take, whether it's your pizza pan or flat pan that's like the terracotta, or your Dutch oven, you want to put your oven to 450, and you want to put the Dutch oven in there with the lid on. Now, some of my ovens heat differently, and I'm sure that every one of our ovens heat differently. So I've just found that I've had to put mine up to 470. The importance is that when you're using your Dutch oven, that it needs to be safe to the 450. Like I said, when I first started out, you guys, I just used whatever I could find at Value Village. Because it didn't matter, right? So I didn't know what the temperature was, temperature tolerance was, or anything like that. So I don't think it's critical, but and I've used glass tops and on there, and I've never ever had a problem. So I'm being quite candid with you. It really doesn't matter, but now, you know, I try to make sure that I buy products that can go to 450. I put my oven to some of my ovens to 470, some are bang on 450. It really is, I would start with 450. It's not that it doesn't work at 450, it just takes a bit longer, okay? So just know that. So what we'll do is once we're at, and that, the 450, it has to be heated at 450 for 30 minutes. So that's really critical because they need to get that good heat on there to make sure that we can keep our shape. So absolutely, I stick with that 30 minutes almost religiously, just because I want to make sure that I'm getting that even heat and that it's really ready for me, okay? So what we'll do is, once you have your form together and your Dutch oven or whatever has been in the oven for 30 minutes, then all I do is I do a last little making sure that it's the shape and everything that I want. Then I just lift the parchment paper and I simply just put it right into the Dutch oven, like so. Now, what I'm doing now is just making sure that the parchment paper is not on top of the artisan bread, because it won't cook properly. So I've just kind of spread it all out. Not that you can't have you can have a little bit overlay and stuff like that. It won't make that big of a difference because this is going to rise quite a bit. So just make sure that for the most part, it's wide open like that, okay? And then you take your lid, and if you're using a stone, of course, there's no lid necessary, and you simply put your lid on and just make sure it's sealed. And if you need to pull out some of the paper, then you can certainly do that. The other important thing I was just going to remind everybody about, and it's easy to do. Thankfully, I've never done it, but even on the actual recipe, it gives you a little tip. Remember, you're now dealing with a very hot pot. So don't forget your oven mitts, because seriously, it can happen that you just grab it, you're not even thinking, right? Because normally you're not starting something going in the oven with a hot pot already. So just a little reminder, no question. I always am mindful of it just because it's easy to do when you're trying to get everything together, especially when you're first starting out. You have so many things on your mind that's something that could be overlooked. So now you're going to put this back into the oven for 30 minutes at 450. Leave it like that, 30 minutes. I don't go over 30 minutes just because I know my ovens really well. Some of them only need 25, but all you want to do is when you look at it after 30 minutes, it should have risen to, I would say, almost the top of the pot. It doesn't have to, but typically that's what happens. If it hasn't, it's still okay. You'll still get a fabulous tasting bread, but just so you have a gauge of how high it should have risen, okay? And just to let you know, like, your parchment paper is going to be brown and crispy. That's exactly the look you want for it. And so after the 30 minutes and you've taken a peek at it, I mean, I wouldn't be too concerned. 30 minutes, bang on, just do what you need to do. Then at that point, you take the lid off, because what we want to do now is brown it. So it's baked in the middle, and now you just want to brown it. So you're going to take off the lid, and you're going to put the Dutch oven back in to the oven, still at 450. And now this one is really going to be personal taste and how hot your oven bakes. So it usually is about 15 minutes, but I do have some ovens that bake it more than enough at 10 minutes. I like my bread really crunchy, so I'm good with that. But again, that's why I say it's personal preference. You can look in the oven anytime and just see, oh, that's dark enough. Because just remember, all we're doing is browning at that point. The bread is baked, okay? So I know that there's a whole range of different colors that people like. So I usually bake a big range just because some people like it lighter and some people want it almost burnt. So it just depends on what you're going for, okay? So again, 15 minutes uncovered at 450.
Someone
So
I think is following along and said she thinks her dough has too much flour, but wants to check that it's okay to add water to the dough to make it the way you showed it at that beginning step.
that's a great question. So I would be concerned about feeling like it's too much water, but if it looks like it's really wet, please feel free to add more flour until you kind of get that more thicker. And again, the opposite applies as well. If you feel that you have too much, or sorry, that was the reverse, wasn't it? So she thinks she has too much water or too little water?
Too much flour, I think.
Okay, yeah. So I would very little with the water. I'd be very conservative with how much you're putting in it each time, just because you can go over really quickly. And so I would just say, yeah, if she can she show it?
I don't know. Do you have the dough there? We could switch to your camera maybe. Let's see. Here we go.
All right. Can you show it to me, please?
Yes. So the dough is like this,
Okay.
and it's like it's flowy. It's like
That's too much. Yeah, you have too much. Yeah, I would put more water in there. I would
Okay.
start with like a quarter cup. Make
Quarter
sure
cup?
it's a quarter cup. Yeah.
but it's sticky. It's sticky, but little bit sticky when it sticks into the palm. I don't know how to show this.
Oh, it's sticking right in the bowl?
Yes. So that is what I was thinking, whether to add water or
Well, I'm going to be honest. I think you need to start all over. I think it might, like, it looks pretty solid to me. I think it's kind of solid. And yeah, it looks a little too solid for me. I mean, you could try water, but I suspect that you're going to have more like a bowling ball when you're done.
Okay, so will it be very hard? The bread will be very hard?
No. Oh, yes, that's what I mean. Yes, it will be
Okay.
very hard. If you continue, I think even if you added water at this point, because it is so hard, I would suspect that it'll be too dense and you won't like it.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Okay,
If-
I got it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if there's some way after the fact, Meg, if somebody needs a little assistance, because I think there's just something has gone wrong. Maybe, do you feel that you put in your 2 cups of flour and 1 cup of bread flour?
I added all-purpose flour.
Okay. So you know what, I would, I always start with my bread flour, and that may make a difference for you. Always put in your bread flour first, and then your all-purpose flour.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah. Because I added everything as the all-purpose flour. I didn't add the bread flour in it.
Oh, you didn't add any bread flour?
All-purpose flour, I think she did.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's going to be the issue. We need to have some bread flour in there.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, so that's where your issue went, which is an easy, problem to solve, right? Just make sure you use 1 cup of bread flour and 2 cups of all-purpose.
Okay.
Okay.
I do have another question about flour. Just what is bread flour, and is there a good brand to get of bread flour?
Robin Hood carries bread flour. My brand is so big that it wouldn't be something you could buy at the store. But bread flour, if you Google it, it can teach you how to make bread flour. If you just have all-purpose, you can actually make your own bread flour. It takes a bit of effort because you have to sift it about 5 times to get it's nice light flour, and that's where we're getting that lightness in the bread with the holes and stuff. That's where we're getting that from. So it just simply is a finer flour rather than the all-purpose. But you, like as I said, I believe it's 5 times you sift it through a fine sieve just to get it to that lightness. But I've certainly done it when I've been out of bread flour, for sure.
Perfect. I did have somebody asking if they're using like the pizza stone or this terracotta stone instead of the Dutch oven.
Yeah.
Do they still try to cover it for that first 30 minutes, or
no,
it's just
you don't need to worry about it. That is super duper hot, and they will get exactly what they need.
okay? Perfect.
Yeah. So yeah, if you're using it, you'll be able to gauge too. I mean, because you'll see it straight away, the browning. Okay. So, was there another question, Meg? Sorry.
I just see one more. Somebody saying that they really enjoy experimenting with add-ins to their basic bread recipes, but they've heard that some things can slow down yeast. And so are there any specific things that people should be careful if they're adding in that might make things not rise as well if you're just experimenting?
Okay, so any kind of herbs would not change what you're doing, but that's a really great question because that was something I was going to mention. This is one of those breads that you can do simply as white if you want, or simply just add any kind of herb combination that you like. I like garlic and rosemary, but if you just want to do garlic, you can just do garlic. If you want to do like a dill and onion, then that's good. The only thing in what whoever is asking the question is speaking of is as soon as you start putting something that's heavier and solid, you're going to have a bit more of a challenge rising it, but it's not insurmountable. So if you wanted to do, like, for instance, if you wanted to do cheese and garlic and make it like a cheese bread, you can either just put the cheese on top, but I like when I'm making bread to have all the flavors throughout. So you could just grate the cheese and put it in the same time that we put in the rosemary and the garlic, and do the same with the garlic, right? So put it in there, just make sure it's well mixed. You don't want clumps of cheese like in one area and not in another. But really, it's not the difference between the rising time, because it's an overnight rise, you're not going to have the same type of difficulty.
Okay, so because it has that longer time, you wouldn't worry about it too much.
I wouldn't be concerned. No, I wouldn't be concerned about it at all. I make a bacon and cheddar, and it's an actual loaf of bread, bacon and cheddar, and it rises really quickly.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. So after all this, putting together all this wonderful ingredients, and again, whatever you choose to do, you can choose to do. I'm just going to show you the lovely finished product. You ready? And this is your bread. So that's, it's going to have varying looks. I've just kept it nice and light for everyone to sort of be able to see. If you have, like when you fold it over, if you have nice peaks, those will be a little bit crispier. Some breads, that's the loveliness about bread, is it has a mind of its own. So one of the things you can't really control is what it actually ends up doing. So it could crack, and that looks beautiful. But there's your bread. So essentially, that's the shape of it. And then the bottom is always a little bit darker. Don't be concerned about that. It doesn't make a difference, but it always is a little bit darker. So when that happens, don't think, oh no, I've burnt it. You haven't. It's delicious, let me tell you.
Somebody asked, do you score the dough like sourdough, or you don't have to do that for these?
I suppose you could, but I don't do that. I find that this dough is a little too elasticy, so scoring it, I think you'd have a real challenge doing that, just because it'll just pull it. So certainly everyone's welcome to, like I say, go for it, right? Try it out. But I just find that it's not, like a sourdough is more solid, or a regular dough is more solid, and you can get that nice score. But I find with this one, it's just too elasticy. Okay, so I was going to cut this for you. Just give me a moment. Just try. One thing I forgot to get was my bread knife. Oh shoot. So I'll just cut it so that you can see how beautiful it is inside.
There's the one downside to doing this virtually is we can't smell the bread.
I know, that's the one downfall. So the outside is so nice and crunchy, and then the inside is just going to be this lovely soft. If I could just hang on, sorry. Having some trouble getting it cut through the bottom. Here we go. So
we can hear the crust
there's I'm gonna bring it closer. So there, and you can probably see the steam rising off of it. It's lovely. So there's the bread. And yeah, so you can, whatever you flavors. Oh, it smells so good. So whatever flavors you want, there's your lovely artisan bread. And it looks like it's a whole lot of work, but honestly, does everyone feel that this is manageable?
Yeah, I've got a couple questions. Somebody was asking about the if they had an oval Dutch oven, it would still work. It doesn't have to be a complete circle. That would be okay.
Yeah, it would be okay. You just potentially, depending on how the size of like how many quarts it is, it may hit touch either side, and therefore it'll change the shape of your bread. But it still is going to be fantastic.
Perfect. And somebody else was just asking if they don't have a Dutch oven and they don't like, are there other alternate containers that you would bake it in, or really?
Like you don't have a casserole dish or a Dutch oven, or like nothing with a lid?
They were just saying other containers that it could be done in. So yeah, maybe a casserole dish. I don't know what they have. So.
Yeah, so any kind of dish with a lid, I wouldn't do the ones, I mean, unless you have one of those like pots that you can actually put in, that the handle can actually be in the oven. But any kind of casserole dish, as long as you just have a lid that can be removed.
That's great.
So that is essentially it. And who wants to come over and have some bread?
Right? Definitely. So does anybody have any questions? I mean, I know we did some of them as we were going along, but we have some time now if people had other questions that they wanted to ask. Yeah. Well, that's a good question. If you have a bakeware that's not able to go up to 450, can you do it in a lower oven or not?
No, I wouldn't recommend that, because the 450 really needs to be that hot. Honestly, as I said earlier, I've done it in Value Village stuff that I have absolutely no idea. I've done it in the cheapest pots that you've ever seen in your life. So I'm not that overly concerned about the 450.
That's good to know. Let's see. Does anybody else have a question? Oh, here we go. How about a cast iron frying pan? Will it overflow a bit? Like those kind of cast iron skillets, I think is what she's talking about.
It won't overflow. And you know, honestly, I've never thought about that, but it should be hot enough, as hot as the baking stones are. So I would, yeah, why not? It won't overflow, because it's not, I mean, if you have one of those, like I would call it a regular size cast iron, like the ones that our parents had. If you have one of those, then you're golden. I wouldn't use a smaller one, but if you have one of those regular size ones, I would go for it. Why not?
Oh, good. I had a question about storing bread. So how do you recommend storing bread sort of before and after cutting? Is there don't put it in a plastic bag, do put it in a plastic bag? Any kind of recommendations to keep it nice and fresh?
Yeah, I know there's a bit of a mixed review on this, isn't there? So the important thing to remember is that this has no preservatives. So the stuff you find in the grocery store, I mean, Wonder Bread, you can leave it on your counter for 2 weeks and it's fine. This, of course, is a little bit different. I would never recommend leaving bread in just paper. It'll dry it out faster than you can even believe. So I always recommend that if you're going to leave it in the paper, which it helps to keep the balance of the dry and the wet, right? So you can leave it in the paper or use parchment paper and put it in a sealed plastic bag, always sealed. And I recommend keeping it in your fridge just because of the no preservatives. So keep it in your fridge, and then you can toast it up or grill it up, like if you're making a grilled cheese or something like that, or if you just want to like toast it up in the oven for garlic toast with your pasta or something like that. But I keep mine just in straight sealed plastic bags. That's how I keep mine. But some people really like to keep it in the paper, but never just paper.
Somebody was asking if they wanted to make this more of a multi-grain bread and they wanted to add maybe like a seed mix or something. How much seed mix should they maybe be adding? Like what's kind of the amount that would make sense? And are there some seeds that work better than others?
No, any seeds would work. I think that's a great question. So I would, if I was making it and I was making it into a multigrain, this size of a loaf, if I really liked a lot of the multigrain, whether it's a mix or whatever, I would do 2 teaspoons. That's what I would say. And no, it doesn't make a difference what type of seed it is. If it's like seeds, because they're dry, you're not adding any moisture to the bread, which is perfect. Anything that adds moisture will maybe change the consistency of the bread, but when you're adding dry ingredients, you're fine.
Oh, that's great. Does anybody else have a question that I maybe missed earlier? I thought I got them all as we were going, but, oh, maybe. Just any tips for using multi-grain flour?
In terms of like, do you use the same amount or anything like that? Like so a lot of multi-grain flour is just whole wheat mixed with grains. So I would do it as the exact same portions, just two to the one bread flour. And I would it's going to be one of those things that you'll need to see what like that young lady that had the one that had too much flour in it, that's going to be an eyeball thing, right? So as long as you're getting a solid disc that is, or round, that is going to feel like it can stick together and it's not too runny, then you're good. But I've never used multigrain flour in this bread. So I suspect, because I've never done anything different, like if I have a white bread recipe that I do, and I just simply substitute out multigrain flour with it.
Someone was asking about rye bread, and would that be different if you were making a rye?
Yes. Yeah. Rye flour is very different, and it can get very hard very fast. And so honestly, I'm just going to be completely honest. I don't know how that would work. I don't think this bread, I wouldn't recommend using rye flour with this type of bread. But you know, what I would say is you could simply Google and just, the important thing is that you want to do with this, because you know, most people, the reason they have trouble with bread or intimidated by bread is the kneading. So that takes some time to sort of get used to how much do I need, how hard do I need, you know, even if it says knead 50 times, well, what does that mean? Because my kneading will be different than yours, and your hands might be smaller, your hands might be stronger, you know, it's all different. And so that's where where you can get that, oh, my bread didn't work. It's mainly because of kneading. That's why this one's so fantastic, because you don't need to knead it. But with rye bread, it's so dense, and it's one of those tricky ones. But if you wanted to, you could Google just simply put in no knead rye bread. And if something comes up, then maybe there's an answer to it. I mean, I've seen this type of bread, like the no knead, or they call it miracle bread or something like that. But that's what I would recommend, because I don't think it would work out well, but there may be somebody that's figured out the chemistry on how to get it so that it's nice and light. Right.
But not just substituted in the same way you would with other flours for this one.
No. You'll get a curling rock, I think. So I'm just gonna, while we have some time, so you can see, this is the one I started when we started. So it's already starting to rise, right? So it'll rise like this quite quickly, and so it'll probably be up to here when it stops rising. But then you still leave it for the 8 hours, like, because it might be up to here in 3 hours, and then it'll stop. It won't overflow. So don't worry about. We have the right amount of flour that it's not going to overflow your bowl unless you're using too small a bowl. And I just say use a medium-sized bowl. You don't need a large one.
All right. Well, did anybody have any last questions before we kind of wrap up for the night?
So the one thing I'll just say is I'm completely open to, if somebody wants a little bit more information or literally wants to come and see me, I'm happy to answer any questions. I do sell this bread at the market, but that's not the reason I'm telling you. So come on down to the market, Bountiful Farmers Market, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and I would be happy and thrilled to help you out. Like if you're having some difficulty and you just want to talk to me face to face and say, this is what I did, and you know, this didn't quite work out, or if it worked out so fantastically, you want to come and brag, I would love to see it.
We always love a brag.
Absolutely. I would love to celebrate with you. So yeah.
Well, that sounds great. Thank you so much for all of this, Judi. It was really great to see how it all came together, and I think there were some really great questions and answers for people, so really appreciate it.
I had a lot of fun. Thanks so much, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you.